Hi there, welcome to this video. So we're going to look at M7, which is analysing the strengths of the investigation. So this is about the good things about the investigation. We've talked already about the things that we think might have caused error, but actually what were the really good things about each of our investigations? As we go through each part of the assignment that we've done, we can kind of say what were the things that were really good. Now, I've put a list of bullet points here about things we could talk about. If you don't think that was a strength of the investigation, don't put it in this section. Okay, so it's just analysing the strengths, the really good things about our investigation. So we're thinking about our investigation as a whole now. So the whole investigation, right the way from researching the symptoms of our patients, to doing our tests on our samples, to assigning which sample went with each patient, to working out what disease we think each of our patients have, and testing our hypotheses. So starting right at the start, do you think that the symptom research was a strength of the investigation? How do you think you got on? Do you think that when you researched your symptoms at the start of the investigation, you came up with the right diseases and made the right hypotheses? Did you do enough research? Did you research in the right places that meant that you came up with the right diseases and you were testing for the right things or not? And this is your judgment, okay? There's not a right and a wrong answer, but you need to say that if you think your symptom research was strength, you need to say, I think that symptom research was a strength and why you think it was a strength of the investigation. You can talk about your practicals. So you could talk about the methods of the practicals and actually carrying them out, and the health and safety. So do you think that the way that you carried out the experiments and the safety that you maintained as you did the experiments, do you think that that was a strength of your investigation? Think about the data that you produce. So you put your data into those results tables, and then you use that data to try and test your hypotheses. Do you think the data was really good quality? Do you think the data was accurate? And you could refer to individual experiments. So you don't need to say, as a whole, all the data I produced was really accurate, good quality, and allowed me to go back to my hypotheses. But you could pick on maybe some experiments that you think gave you particularly good or particularly accurate data and were the real pivot points of being able to kind of come to your conclusions at the end. Do you think we maintained the integrity of the samples well? So you could talk here about how we didn't have our own sample. We actually just had a class set of samples. And it might be that one lesson, you might have used one sample to do your reagent test strip. And then when you took sample one again to do your Benedict's test, you might have actually picked up a different sample. Now, these samples should be exactly the same, obviously, but you don't know that another person didn't contaminate that sample. So perhaps that might not be a strength of the investigation, we might suggest, okay? We also didn't put them in the fridge between your lessons because there was just so many. So you could talk about integrity of the samples if you want, but I would suggest probably not. It was probably more likely a source of error. You could talk about the equipment used. So obviously when we're measuring things, we could measure in a beaker, we could measure with Pasteur pipettes, we could measure with those pipettes with the little wheel on them. So there's different types of pipettes, and the better the pipette, the lower the percentage uncertainty. So you could talk about some of the equipment we used was really good equipment, and that was a strength of the investigation because we were able to measure accurately. So you might want to think about which experiments we used the best equipment in. Completion of practicals in the given time. So do you think like time management was a strength of the investigation? Obviously, you couldn't do every investigation in the world, sometimes due to money, obviously, but also sometimes to do with time. But do you think that you planned out your practicals in a way that meant you were able to get them done in a timely manner? Obviously, with the microbiology, we weren't able to do that within one lesson. We set up the agar plates, then we had to wait for a week for the colonies to grow before we could look at them. Was that a suitable time frame? Do you think that the planning of time-wise for that was suitable, and was that a strength? And then finally, I've mentioned this already, but did your results enable you to test the hypotheses? So that's a strength, obviously. If you'd planned the right experiments, that meant that you got data that was relevant to test a hypothesis to say whether your hypotheses were right or not at the end. So make sure you're positive in this section. If you think any of those things weren't a strength, now is not the time to mention it. What we're talking about now is this is a strength and why it's a strength. Okay, and that's it for this one.